Older generations of Reddit, what toys did you have as a child that would be considered too dangerous to be given to a child today? My dentist used to give me vials of mercury to bring to school for show and tell. My parents bought me a rock collection at a natural history museum that included a chunk of asbestos from which you could pull fibrous material. We also had metal trucks with extremely sharp edges and lead-based paint jobs. My sister brought a vial of mercury home from science class. They sent it home with the kids and we played with it, rolling it around in our hands. Metallic mercury is very safe to touch. The main danger is inhalation of fumes and ingestion. Playing with it in your hands for a couple minutes probably would not do much. As long as you don't have any open cuts, it's fine. Ohio blue tip matches. My grandma let us carry the box out her back door to burn shit. Strike anywhere. Boom fire. Not sure how I survived. I have a crayon melter that melts crayons and lets you pour it into molds so you could make your own crayons and rings. Turns out production stopped because of a failure to stop the heater from being turned on if the lid was opened. Those were so much fun. We would pretend we were blacksmiths when taking them out of the molds. Waxmiths. Creepy crawlers. It was the safer 90s version, but you could still burn yourself on those metal molds. I still have a scar on my forearm from one of those. Even then I remember my brain telling me those types of toys are dumb. You buy it and what? You make a few squishy things that collect dirt and get lost before you run out of stuff to make more. But oh god, did I love playing with one when I got it, lol. Dude, you bought it because of the dope commercial like all other cool 90s toys, unless it had a show you watched. I want to deny it, but the jingle played in my head as soon as I read the name. Never had them myself, but they looked great in commercials. We had these weird fake cigarettes that actually allowed you to blow smoke that was quite realistic. We freaked out a lot of adults with them. There were these fake cigarettes that were white sugar with one end that was glowing. Red that were sold in a packet of 10 each, was wrapped in a round cigarette paper. I think Fanny Farmer Candies sold them. They have candy cigars to that, a gum that are labeled like you were having a boy or girl, like the tradition of smoking a cigar when you have a kid. There was candy cigarettes, the chalky white things with a dyed red tip, or gum cigarettes that were wrapped in a paper tube. The surface of the gum was powdered down inside the paper, so if you blew through the end of it, it looked like a puff of smoke. Fancy. I had a large red plastic toy box that looked like a treasure chest in my bedroom closet growing up. When I was around 7, late at night the toy box would start taking to me from the closet, calling my name. Michael. In a low, creaky voice. For weeks, I was terrified to fall asleep because I knew I would wake up to the voice again. Yet every morning, when the sun filled my room, I would open the lid to the box and it would just be toys, like it should be. Finally, I was able to convince my mom that I was not making it up and got her to sleep in my room that night with me, and shortly thereafter she woke me up with "Michael, wake up. I hear it." Long story short, we discovered it was my talking KITT with very low batteries, talking away in slow motion by itself. I do not know if those should be illegal, but I definitely feel like the experience damaged me. Props to your mom for actually listening to you though, even if it took a while to convince her. I know a lot of parents that won't have. On playgrounds, there is always the spinning gate. It was a gate on a pole. You stood on the back of it and kick off like a skateboard and just spin around on it. Think a merry-go-round, but smaller and crazier. We had something like this on my 90s school playground. It wasn't a spinning gate, but basically just a small, single-person merry-go-round with a tall pole up the middle to hang on to. Because they were so tiny you could get some absolute G-force going with another kid's help. We used to challenge each other to spin on them and then run up the slide. Multiple broken bones were had. Still heaps of these in Australia. I had an incredibly heavy metal square looking robot that spit smoke it produced from burning oil. It smelled noxious and was heavy enough it could have easily been a murder weapon. I had one of those too. So cool. I can still remember how it smelled. A chemistry set. My brother and I were totally unsupervised and never followed the instructions. We just mixed chemicals together at random to see what would happen. I remember one combination turned into this really smelly black foam-like substance. My dad and his brothers did not have a chemistry set, but their father did let them play with mercury in his workshop. They also taught themselves to make zip guns, I think they were called. Basically, guns crafted from parts like car antennas. I made some blow liquidy stuff with my chemistry set doing that. It got on my hands and the furniture and would not come out. And that was around the time my parents realized it probably was not a great idea to let a 10-year-old play with random chemicals, probably methylene blue, from a chemistry set, more likely a solution of copper sulfate. Not a toy, but playgrounds were plunked down onto asphalt and concrete, with metal slides that cause third-degree burns on hot summer days. I remember those. Some older public playgrounds still had those as late as the early 90s. My city got rid of all wooden playgrounds, metal slides, and tire swings around 1995-96. Except they replaced them all with generic boring equipment made of metal and plastic. Some parks had kick-ass equipment before that. My elementary school had a wooden playground into the early 2000s, with metal slides and monkey bars. It had a nasty habit of giving off splinters, but was awesome. From my memory, it was a few huge rectangles sprawling out with different rooms housed underneath. A nearby elementary school had a similarly awesome wooden playground for a few years after my school's was replaced with the stock metal and plastic one. This one was designed like a castle, had towers and tire bridges in addition to the metal slides. Old school playgrounds are probably cooler, just for the fact that they were for the most part unique. In the late 90s my elementary school had a metal slide about 15 feet tall, the ladder to climb up, and the railing around the 1-foot wide platform at the top were made of skinny metal tubing that got slick as duck when it was wet. The sides of the slide were about 6 inches tall, super easy to just go over the edge. Several kids fell or were pushed off over the years when I was there. One boy had to be hospitalized not once, not twice, but 3 times after jumping off it. Around 2001 the school tore it down and replaced it with an extremely lame plastic slide about 8 feet tall, with sides about 1 foot tall. Oh, and I have a children's science textbook from the 1930s that describes all sorts of experiments with electricity kids can do with the power outlets in their home. What could go wrong? We also had a death slide. In the right conditions you could fly 6-8 feet off the landing. As for electrical outlets, my parents used to give us old keys to play with, and we would stick them in the outlets because it looked like an ignition. I have no idea how I never shocked the shit out of myself. I do not know how I did not die from electrocution when I was a kid. One time I put a pair of tweezers in a plug and melted it and did not have a scratch. Kids have such a weird obsession with electrical outlets. I caught my nephew taking off a plastic Baba-proof cover and try and stick a spoon into one of the sockets. He is 11 months old LOL. I never owned one, but you could buy a radioactive science kit that came with real radioactive material and a Geiger counter. My father had one of those. We were just talking about it, and that's actually why I asked this question laughing. They were popular in the 50s. Op's third arm starts scrolling. I just broke out the fourth arm actually laughing. Skydancers were banned, if I recall correctly. Beyblades were banned from school. Both had the habit of spinning into children's eyes and blinding them. I freaking loved Skydancers. When I was about 6-7 my aunt made me the most bitchin' Skydancer costume for Halloween, with huge foam-filled wings that strapped to my hands and a twirly skirt. It was epic beyond all belief, and I am pretty sure I've never seen a picture of that Halloween, which makes it all the more dreamlike. Toy Maximum Die-Cast Factory Metal Molder. My mom got me one of these from a garage sale when I was 7-8. Essentially you melt down scrap metal, screws, bolts, BBS, whatever you have, then tip the melting area into a rubber mold, stick it in the fridge and boom. Neat little metal trinket. I used to love making these. There was a flame, skull, and a rifle mold that I remember using the most. But you know what I remember even more than those molds? All the burns on my hands, and that one time I caught the carpet on fire, laughing my butt off. No shot these would sell today. Laughing. Tried to mobile one, he let me. but if you Google image it, you lines be able to find it easily. Lawn darts. When the game was over, we used to throw them in the air and then run for our lives. I have no idea how I survived the 70s. Did that in the 80s too. Same in the 90s. Grandparents had 2 or 3 sets, and as kids we would loft them at each other. Rocks. More specifically those small playground pebbles. We had a game on the playground where we would have rock wars. 2 teams. Everyone loses. There were rules of course. Like no throwing handfuls directly at the opposing team. You had to throw it up like a mortar and let it rain down on the enemy. If you say you are done, no one can attack you until you come back. There was a line on the ground that the teams could not cross, etc. Breaking the rules means that everyone targeted you for the remainder of the game. Thankfully most small kids cannot throw rocks that hard or accurately from a distance. I'm not even old. This happened in the early 90s. I had a set of clackers and the bruised and swollen wrists and elbows that go along with learning how to use them. Not sure many people today would even know what those were, though. Just look them up. Apparently they would also eventually shatter, sending glass into the face of the person playing with them. As a young person who had clackers, if you kept those MF for that long you were a god among men. Moon shoes. I wanted moon shoes so bad because I thought I'd be able to fly like 12 feet in the air. Turns out I was a fat kid laughing my butt off. I wasn't a fat kid. I was a super skinny lanky kid, and I can tell you now, those shoes sucked. You missed out on nothing. I could jump higher standing still with no effort standing in a swimming pool. Same here. Can confirm. I was so disappointed in how lame and clunky they were after yearning for a pair for so long and finally getting them when I was 8-9 years old. I think I used them maybe 5 times and never touched them again because they just sucked. Made me skeptical of all the awesome looking toy commercials from there on out. Laughing. I'm surprised trampolines are still around. Even with the dumb safety cage netting they must still have now. Yeah, I was gonna say trampoline without a net or padding on the edges. So either you flew off the thing and got a concussion, or you got your leg maimed when it got stuck between the springs. Bounce me. It's gonna be a maze. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe for more videos.